one of my mantras that I've been really feeling into over the last few years, especially since being a mum, is strengthen the spine and soften the heart. So that's kind of how I would describe femininity for me, is that strength and that courage and that caring and protectiveness and all of those things, qualities that come with it, but with a soft heart. Yes. You know, with a gentle heart, with kindness, with compassion.
Welcome back to Stories of Being. I'm Ingrid, and each week I sit down with people who are challenging the way we relate to ourselves, each other, and the planet in this ever-changing world. This week I chat to Brooke Brash. Brooke is a mother and co-founder of Imaginal, an online platform and community inspiring evolution through connection, awareness, and imagination. Brooke is really someone that understands her own kind of personal transformation and also our individual ability to create in this world. She has a really beautiful presence about her and is so kind of like grounded and light, so kind, but also has this real strength about her. In this episode, we talk everything from the power in slowing down, changing the way we view nature and our relationship with nature, feminine power, parenting, and living a life in flow. Brooke has a lot of really cool stuff going on, so I'll link to Imaginal and all of Brooke's info in the show notes, and I really hope you enjoy this episode. So to kind of kick off, I'd really love to understand if you had sat in a tea ceremony, say 6 years ago, what that experience would have been like then versus sitting in a tea ceremony today, in terms of kind of how it felt in your body, what was going through your mind, and just the experience itself.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I feel like with tea, it meets you where you're at any given moment. And it allows you to, feel that need of what's happening in your life at that point. And so in saying that, it would have met me at a very chatty mind. It would have been a space where my mind was very full. So not mindful, but very full. And I think that sometimes can, not as receptive to certain things. And although I do feel like it would have pointed me in the direction of where I needed to go next, but maybe not in the way that I would have learnt and experienced now. One of the things, though, is that I actually did have my first tea experience when I was 5 years ago, and I was still in the corporate world at that point. But the difference between 6 years ago and 5 years ago was in between that moment, I had my version of a burnout or a collapse or whatever you want to call it. I call it mine a self-revolution stage. And from that moment, everything sort of changed within me, and I was more open and receptive to life and asking questions, and I had more space to really explore what was in front of me. And so thinking about that moment, which really felt like a coming back home in a way. It's like I kind of picked it up from my last incarnation as a practice that I used to do. It just felt really beautiful to be in there. And I was really captured by the beauty of it and the essence of it, artful movements and the aesthetic of the chachi and the stillness and space that I had felt at that moment, and how it kind of opened a portal within me of like creativity and clarity, and that's what I experience today. So that's the differences between the two.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you did your first tea ceremony, you were still working in the corporate world in finance. At that moment when you did the tea ceremony, were you kind of searching for something? Were you looking to kind of move on from what you were doing, and it all evolved from there? And I guess what was that process like for you leaving corporate and then almost going in to the unknown and your next chapter, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, it played a huge part in it because it allowed that space that I needed to be able to even question those things. Before, I was just so full, as I said before, of all of the things that I had to do. And, you know, even me coming into the corporate world, like how I even got to there was really a pattern of success that I had created and initiated when I was 8 years old, of wanting to be a businesswoman with a briefcase. And I wanted to be super successful because of things that happened in the childhood that impacted that. And so when I got to the corporate world, I was in this pattern of success that I had created for myself, and I had all the resources to do all the things and be the person that I wanted to be. And I felt like I made it in that way for my 8-year-old self. But what had changed in me was what the pattern of success felt like that to me in that moment, but I just didn't realize it yet. I hadn't caught up. And I guess the messages that were coming from me, the whispers that I ignored, is this my life? Is this what my purpose is, you know, all of those things. I was like, yeah, we're good, you know. But they got louder and louder and louder, and my body started impacting that response of neglect, of listening to myself. And when I had that self-revolution, everything started to open up, and the practices like tea allowed me to question and move into a different way.
Yes, and I guess I think I've heard you talk about this before, maybe on another podcast, but I think what you said was when you're just the place of being is where kind of creativity and innovation happens. Yeah. And like you just said, it's also then when you actually can listen to yourself, because otherwise there's just all of this noise and you're just in the doing, that you're not listening to your body and you don't have that connection. And once you actually stop, there is so much power in stopping and being with yourself.
Yes.
You know, and then that's when so many things can happen and you can actually tune into what's next for you.
Exactly. And it really is this, like, I mean, everything that I do and every incarnation of projects and initiatives and everything that I do, everything centers around creating space, because it is the beautiful, fertile soil of which anything can grow. Like, as you said, you know, if there's so many things in the soil, you can't actually see what you're planting next, you know. So it's really important to create that space.
I think that's so powerful, because I don't know, it feels like currently, you know, like creating space and sitting down and meditating or doing a tea ceremony or whatever it is so we can then just continue doing. And it just sort of like halts the burnout for a second, rather than actually using it as a way for all of these things to happen. Yeah. You know, so it's almost changing the way we view just being and the space that we need.
Exactly. I think we're so conditioned to being in that doing mentality that we've actually forgotten what being's all about, like being a human being. You know, it's in our word that we call ourselves, but we don't do it that much. Yes, no. We don't be that much, I should say. Even my language, I was like, we don't do it that much, but we don't be that much. And it's a really reshaping and reforming the way that we approach life. And that's what happens when you do create the space just to create space, not for productivity, for example.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And was that kind of shift in mindset, was that difficult? Was that a process for you from kind of achieving and doing, say, in the corporate world that you were in, to giving yourself that space? Yeah, was that a process and a transition for you?
Oh, big time. Yeah, as soon as I made the decision and had the courage to leave a full-time job to go to nothing, I didn't have anything planned. All I knew is that I needed to step away so that I can work out what's next for me. And I remember when I first left, it was in 2019 in April, I turned all of my rituals and my practices that I had accumulated, because it took me a few years to leave, right? Yes. All the things that I had accumulated, and I made that my work. as in I had to do tea ceremony for an hour, and then after that we're doing breath work, and then after that we're going to yoga, and I was like, I'm exhausted. This is not what's supposed to be happening, you know. And so I had to check. It took me about a few months to kind of unravel that conditioning of, okay, this isn't actually serving me in the way that it's supposed to, because it's becoming work.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's such a good point, because it's like these morning routines you see that are like so hectic and that take hours.
Yeah.
It sometimes it can just feel like another thing you have to tick off.
Yeah.
You know, which is again that tricky balance. And so what was it about tea and that ceremony that you were drawn to, and why did it become, you know, something that is now integral to your kind of daily life and practice?
Yeah, I think for me, you know, previous to that, I mean, I always had a yoga practice since I was 15 years old. So I always had like some connection to that spirit world, mind-body connection, etc. But when I was in the corporate world, that kind of got put onto a bit of the side, even though I was still doing it. My mentality was still like doing all the things in my head, to-do list, etc. I was still showing up, but not really there. And I think there was something about the ceremony that captured me in a way with, like, I'm a beauty lover. I love everything to do with beauty and how to create it in lots of different ways, and not in the commercial way that we know it today, but in the way of reverence and sacredness and in the natural ways that we are. And the whole ceremony encapsulates that. It's a sensorial experience. You're drinking in the tea. The tea itself is a medicine. It's a plant medicine that has its own qualities. There is the movement, the artful movement that's within that ceremony, that is not just sitting there and trying to meditate. You're just being and being mindful in those moments. And yeah, just the space. I just realized how much space it created in my life. And for me, that's what medicine I needed.
Yes. Yeah. Was it in these tea ceremonies play a big part in then your next kind of business and endeavour in terms of ritual community, which is now Imaginal, which we can obviously chat about? But when you look back, was it moments in those ceremonies that kind of sparked, you know, these next creations for you?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I have had tea ceremony as a consistent practice for over 5 years now. And that space that it created, and I alluded to it before, it allows me to like tune into this portal of like creativity and clarity and connectedness of information and ideas, and so much comes out of those spaces of just being, just like literally listening to whatever's happening inside, and also the attunement to everything that's happening outside of myself as well just becomes stronger and stronger. And for me personally, within my like contribution into ritual community and Imaginal, it was the trying to bring together all of the practices that I had experienced over those times in one space, so that people could really delve into that for their own being and for their own awareness, because everyone is so different. Everyone has a different way of relating to the sacred and themselves. So that idea came through because of all of those spaces that I had created for myself.
Yes. Yeah. I've been reading Rick Rubin's book. I think you'd probably really like it. It's called The Art of Being. It's all about creativity, and not in the sense of painting or, you know, writing a song, but just creativity of how you live your life, which I think is a huge thing. Mm. And he talks a lot about how, say, creativity or ideas kind of come through you, you know, like almost from the universe, and you're this kind of vessel almost. Mm. And I think like what you're saying, it's like when you're in that that still moment or that moment where you have the space, it's like that's when things drop in, like you're saying, and these ideas and creations come through you. And before reading this book, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's such a beautiful way to see it, and it also sort of removes yourself then from the idea, which is often the biggest block.
Totally.
Your own self is the biggest
100%,
block.
Yeah.
So if you, can kind of see it as just something that is coming through you, I feel like then that as well gives you more opportunity to then create.
Yeah.
Because you're out of the way.
Yeah, you're the vessel.
You're the vessel.
That gets to come through you. And there is this doorway, I feel, that opens. It's like I visualize it as like a opening, like a light that just kind of like starts to come through. But it is, it's just such a potent space to be in. To create that space for yourself to just truly listen. There's just like an openness and a receptivity that particularly tea provides to me, but that happens in different practices for different people.
Yes.
And so that's the beauty of our individuality.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so your business, I don't even like calling it business almost because it feels like so much more than that. But Imaginal.
Yeah.
I've read, when you talk about Imaginal, you talk about this idea of the importance of healing your own self and how that sort of is an important part of then healing the collective.
Yeah.
And obviously at this point in time, there's a lot of just awful stuff happening in the world. And I think sometimes it can feel, or it can be perceived almost as kind of selfish or not necessary to kind of work and heal your own self when there's or just, be with yourself and work through your stuff when there's all of this stuff happening in the world.
Yeah.
But I just, there's such a disconnect there, and I think the healing of the self is part of the healing of the collective. So I'd love to hear, kind of your experience of that, kind of your thoughts on it, and then how that translates into the work that you do, because it's such an important piece of the puzzle, I think. Yeah,
definitely. And I totally understand that notion of the navel gazing experience. And I really feel you can't have collective healing without individual healing, and vice versa. They're so interconnected. And we're also governed by all of these natural cycles that are happening around us, right? There's the cosmological cycles, there's the moon phases. I mean, the moon has an incredible impact on the ocean, and we are made of water too, so there's no doubt that there's an impact on our own personal being. There's the seasonal changes, there's for women now our moon cycles and our nervous system cycles, right? There are our nervous system cycles. We all have the survival pathways, but we all react in different ways and respond in different ways to different situations. So there are a lot of cycles that are being present right now. And the fact is that we are not aligned to our natural cycles at all. And I mean, some of us are, but in general, we are not. And that's what causes that dis-ease and that sense of, dismay in our world right now, because we're not attuning to those. So what needs to happen is an awareness. There's an awareness piece, first of all, within ourselves to understand the different parts of who we are, because when we do that, we can see the different parts of other people, and that's where compassion comes through. And so when we have that an awareness of ourselves, we also have the awareness of every single living being and our impact on that as well. So it does start with self in a way, because we have to have that awareness to be able to have awareness of other beings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think also if like what you're saying, if we're coming from a place that's wounded or unhealed is a very general term, we will then make decisions from that wounded place. So therefore it's hard, or, that place of survival. So, which isn't compassion or understanding or any of these things.
Yeah.
So, then the decisions that are made are coming from a place that, is disconnected and not connected to, like you're saying, the other humans in in the world.
Yeah, we can see ourselves in other humans when we understand who we are. And what you're talking about, when we're speaking from a certain part of ourselves that may have experienced some turmoil in the past, and that's the pattern that we create, because that's what we had created to survive in that moment of that, event. When we start to, and I've done a little bit of work on understanding self-awareness from an experiential neuroscience lens, and so we talk in parts. So when we're operating from a part of ourselves, we're not operating from the one that observes and witnesses and has the awareness of all other parts. We're operating from one part. And when we do that, there's a certain amount of patterns that we play out. But when we get to know that part of ourselves, when we get to know that part that feels a certain way, they all have different purposes, needs, wants, desires. When we understand what our own parts need, then we can bring them into the collective and then operate from the one that observes rather than the one that is coming from all different directions.
Yes, and I guess when you have that understanding of your own patterns and you're coming from a place of awareness, it's that the macro thing. You can then look at the world on a macro level, and the patterns that are there, and kind of see this thing keeps happening, be it war or famine or whatever it is, and actually sort of go back and look at the patterns that keep leading to these points.
Yeah, definitely.
So it is all just kind of this reflection, the inner is all often the reflection of what's happening on the outer.
Exactly. I mean, whatever's happening on the inside of us is happening on the outside. We see that as a reflection. There's so within as without. There's that that adage that we can refer to, because what's happening in the world right now, the horrific events that are happening, the destruction of our environment and our climate is the reflection of what's happening within us right now as well. And so having an awareness of ourselves, and being able to adapt and shift and transform ourselves, we're going to see that transform on the outside as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you kind of mentioned it before, that Imaginal is it's a place where you kind of curate everything that you've learned and practices that have helped you kind of over the last few years. What else do you kind of share, and what information do you share with your community to kind of help with that inner healing and kind of show the different ways that we could be in the world?
Yeah, beautiful question. I think Nat, Isis and I have really taken all of the things that we have learned and built up over our life, and the life learnings that we've had, and the beautiful teachers and guides and mentors and magicians and all of the people in our life to come together into this community where we can learn with each other and learn from each other. So this is a space to create space, and that is the theme of my life. I think I feel like it's the mission that I've had since I left work is always to create space to connect with ourselves, with each other, and with the natural world. And that's what we do at Imaginal. We connect with each other. Community is so important, especially in these times. We connect with the learnings and study and get inspired by ancient and new ways of being. We're changing those patterns, right? We're changing the patterns that we have had that aren't working and not there for us anymore. And then we're also sharing about how we can connect to the natural world and the sacred in a way that's going to help all beings thrive. So they're the kind of elements to that. And we do that by receiving, we do all the practices, and we do that by learning and inspiring, and we do that by integrating as a community. So we have a forum to talk about it.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah.
And I think a course you're currently running is all around kind of the wisdom of trees.
Yeah.
Which I just think I think that is so beautiful. And I think it's this, to me, it seems like this signal or this shift in the way we view or can view the natural environment.
Yeah.
And like you just said, obviously that connection between self and nature and our planet is so vitally important. And with this course, it's almost like there's this, it shows this respect to, say, trees, but also kind of the natural world itself.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I'd love to hear kind of, I guess, more about that course, because I think it just seems so beautiful.
Yeah.
And the importance of almost that shift in perspective in how we view nature.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It's the approach that we take. And, I mean, I've always been fascinated by trees. They are just the most incredible, magnificent beings. And when we put this course together, it was really to pay homage to these life-giving trees that allow us to take this breath that we're taking right now. Yeah. You know, that's the connection that we're wanting to imbue in this course, is how they are part of us. You know, they are our lungs right now. Yes. You know. And they have an incredible network and a communication system between their trees, like between all of the trees. They have, instead of a survival of the fittest, it's survival of the symbiotic relationships, you know, and that's something that I think we can learn from in these days. And one of the ways that we're doing that is through understanding their ecology, so understanding how they work and like all the different trees, and creating a relationship with these trees like we have in the past, mythological aspects of trees, because every human group has had some connection to a sacred tree as their center, you know, and that's all over the world. Sometimes they wouldn't even have a connection with each other at that point, but they all had a sacred connection to the tree. It was part of their mythology. And the cosmologically, how we can understand from them as within, so without, how we are a part of this sacred agreement that we've kind of forgotten about, you know, and it is a representation of how we can commune with the natural world in a way that is reverent, that is sacred, so that we can shift our approach to how we work with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, like, where do you think we lost that connection and that respect? And I mean, that's such a huge question, you know, like, but you know, like, why do you think we're at this point where there is no generalization, but there is that disconnect, and there isn't that reverence for the trees and the earth and our reliance and our interdependence on, or, you know, with the world and the natural world?
I mean, I think it's, as we were talking about before, it starts with how we've potentially disconnected from ourselves, because we are nature, we are part of the natural world. So if we've disconnected to ourselves, then we've actually broken that connection to the rest of the natural world as well. And I think that plays out in a lot of different ways. But I think, you know, for the victory of progress in our society, I think that takes more priority than reverence and reciprocity to the life-giving nature of all plants, animals, beings in this world. We've lost that sense of reciprocity, of feeding those that feed us.
Yes.
Yeah.
What you just said is so powerful. In if we're disconnected from ourselves, or we need nature to connect back to ourselves, and vice versa. That is such a powerful thought and philosophy, and it sort of highlights that connection. And I think often we can just think of nature as what we get back from it, and we take and we take, and it's very extractive.
Exactly.
There's no
reciprocity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's because we've viewed it as a resource rather than as a family member.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and like Timo Granzotti, who's one of the teachers in the course, I'm going to paraphrase, but he shared that we have been a solution in this dynamic between the natural world rather than the problem in previously. So this narrative of what we're experiencing as being the problem is actually new, and it's a small story of what we have had and our relationship we've had with nature. We've been pollinators, we've been propagators, we have been assimilators and facilitators of creation, right, in the past. It's like, how do we remember those ways? And that's part of what we're doing in the course, is remembering those ways. And Isis is also one of the teachers and co-founders in this Tree of Life course, and she talks about like communing with the trees like they are our family members.
Yes.
And every living being, rather than a resource to, cut down for houses or for furniture and for all of those things. And if we do that, and that's okay, how do we give back to them so that there is a reciprocal nature? We're not just taking. We're planting trees. We're doing it in ways that is sustainable. There's lots of things that Timo shares in the course around practices that they do in Japan to actually keep the trees still standing, and they just carve off a little bit of the tree so they still stand.
Yes.
So there are different ways that we can do this, and what it comes down to is reverence and reciprocity.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's almost like when you have that connection and you're in communion with something like a tree or all of nature, you start to see it as a whole system, or almost like a whole being, and how it all works together, rather than just a tree or just the ocean or just these reductive, like, single things.
Yeah.
You see how, the relationship between all of these elements and how they work together. And I think if we also saw it like that, that would change the way we combat some of the ecological or climate issues or, environmental issues that we face, because currently we're dealing with all of these issues as single things.
Yep.
And I always think, like, oh, great, awesome, like that everyone's talking about reducing carbon and all of these things. That's a great discussion.
Yeah, totally.
But if we, reduce our carbon, that doesn't mean that everything's fixed.
Yeah.
They all work together.
They all work together. There's a whole systems approach that needs to be made. And I think, even when we go to the doctors and we get this one thing, ailment fixed, and then there's something else that happens over here, and that's where we have like a holistic doctors and all of those that like look at the whole system. It's very different to like the medical system that has certain approaches, which is like that's what they're trained for, and they do a very good job for that. Like that's what is needed. But there's a different perspective and approach to make optimizing things rather than just fixing things.
Yes.
And I remember when I was at the Daintree rainforest, which is, one of the oldest rainforests in the world, and I was just like marveling at these incredible trees and all of the creatures that were a part of this like great ecosystem, right? You had the canopy of the trees providing those benefits for the ones down below, the epiphytes on the trees, through to the fungi and the creatures like transforming the leaves into compost so that they can regenerate again, and like there's this like beautiful cycle of life. And then I realized in that moment that we're probably the only being that doesn't have their beneficial impact in this ecosystem. Like we're the ones that are still remembering how to be just like the epiphytes or the fungi in the ground. We've forgotten our like relational rhythm in that space.
Yes. And
that's something that we need to remember, and it's almost what needs to happen to kind of combat these crises that we're having, in every aspect of climate, etc., is a spiritual revolution to understanding that we are part of this ecosystem and that we have a sacred connection to this beautiful place that we call Earth.
Yes. And it's not easy,
no,
but when you put it like that, it's remembering where we come from.
Yeah.
Which is big, but it's also very simple.
Yeah.
Because it's who we are and it's our home.
it's a lens to see the world through, like how we make our decisions, how we think, what we say, what we do, how practice in our lives, we can just do. It doesn't have to be a huge shift. It just has to be subtle to include that in the frame of decision making that we have in our days. How we, what we do with our money, how we purchase things shows what we want to keep continuing and what we don't. For example, with organic food, I know it's expensive, but it's also expensive on our health as well, not doing that.
Yes.
But what we choose to spend our money on is our vote towards something.
Yes.
And that's a very simple one to kind of incorporate into our worlds. In my area, there's a compost bin, right, that gets put into our apartment building. And that's an easy thing for me to do. I just get all the compost and I put it in the bin. Pretty easy, and that's going to create some soil to regenerate this earth. So like there's this simple things that we can do in our lives to shift back into that reciprocity, sacred agreement.
Yes. And it's also, it's like you're saying, the intention behind it.
Yeah.
So these really small things like putting food scraps in the compost instead of just the bin.
Yeah.
It's like the intention behind that and the intention behind all these tiny things. There's so much power in that, and it's like a signal that we care.
Yeah. We're giving back in some way. It doesn't have to be huge ways that we do that. I mean, great if you can do that too, but, to break it down into small things that we can take ownership of and accountability for. Even the way that we like walk through the park, like, is there like a moment where you just feel like, thank you, just little things like that. Like it's something that I always share with my son. Like we talk to the sun, we talk to the moon, we talk to the plants, we talk to the trees. We ask permission to take a flower off a plant. There's this like just the small little things that we can share and just have reverence for, I think goes a long way.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And if our modern world is, there's so many incredible things about it. So this is not a diss on, the modern world.
Yeah.
But just we're so kind of out of touch and out of the rhythm of nature in terms of seasons. Like we can get any type of fruit or vegetable any time of year. Yeah. We can have the same temperature in our house any time of year. Mm-hmm. So we're not we're not in rhythm with nature.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's not necessarily, I'm not saying that's bad, but it means it furthers that disconnect and not needing to be in tune.
Yeah. Because
it's a control thing.
Yeah.
It's, humans.
Comfort,
exactly. And there's a balance between comfort and discomfort.
Yeah.
But it's this, it's like this control over the natural world. And I think, sometimes that's good and necessary, but it's also like maybe potentially gives us a different idea of where we fit in the natural world and our importance in it.
Well, just I think the awareness of it, the awareness of the cycles that I mentioned before, like they do play a part in the way that we are. Like, when something doesn't feel very good for you, there's like something going on and then you speak to a friend and they're feeling the exact same thing, there's energies and everything at play, whether there's something that you subscribe to or not, there are things that are happening at play. And when we become more sensitive and attuned to those, the more that we flow with life rather than we push through it. Like be like, oh, maybe it's not the time to start that project, or maybe it's time to have a little rest, maybe it's time to slow down, maybe it's time to revive up, like there's different cycles. Like the seasons do that so beautifully, right? The trees actually do it very poetically, when it's winter, they just stand there and they just like rest and they recoup. They're not trying to grow anything. They're just chilling, you know, literally. And then when it's time to bloom, then it's like on. They're like, let's do this. Like it's such a beautiful like moment. And then when there's time to let go, they all turn gold and red and yellow, and then they just fall to the ground so gracefully. And I'm like, yes, that's what we need to do more of, because maybe it doesn't happen every like 3 or 4 months for us, but there are times in the week, there are times in our day that we just need to be more attuned to, and that's where our nervous system cycles come into play. More attuned to the cycles that we have and the patterns that we have, and knowing when to rest and when to do.
Yes. And as a woman, we are, say, very cyclical.
Definitely.
beings.
Yeah.
I've always thought, so I would say we're more kind of in touch or in connected to nature. Not that men aren't, but, you know, as women, we are very cyclical. Nature is very cyclical. And I would say that's often been seen as something negative and, you know, a bad thing and something that we want to stop or shut down.
Yep.
But I think that's actually so much of the power that women can hold.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think since having a child, I've really thought more about being a woman, and power is not necessarily the right word, but this kind of strength that women hold.
Yeah.
And that's the strength that women hold isn't necessarily what we see as strength.
Yeah.
So as a woman and as a mother, where do you kind of see, the strength of the feminine, I guess why it's needed now? I really feel like now is this point in time where this feminine energy and feminine power is so needed, and there's almost this shift kind of from the masculine to the feminine. Yeah. And, it feels like such a big thing at the moment. Yeah. And, have you kind of felt that? What do you think about being a woman? And
love it.
Where I just think women will change the world, essentially.
Yeah, I think we will co-shape it with the masculine in a really beautiful way. And I, as someone that was really in my masculine, especially in the corporate world, and I put my hand up and I definitely skipped my moon cycles, you know, with contraceptives, etc. And that's like just a signal, that a symbol of where I was at that point. And I think it's really interesting since leaving the corporate world and really finding that slowness and that softness. And one of my mantras that I've been really feeling into over the last few years, especially since being a mum, is strengthen the spine and soften the heart. So that's kind of how I would describe femininity for me, is that strength and that courage and that caring and protectiveness and all of those qualities that come with it, but with a soft heart, you know, with a gentle heart, with kindness, with compassion. And for me, that's how I really step into that femininity and want to be able to share from that space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And that you can do both. You can have this strength, but with compassion and kindness and love. And it's like that piece seems to be missing. Yeah. You know, and seeing each other as human beings.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it takes strength to be kind in this world sometimes. You know, it takes the strength and the courage to have an open heart and to have understanding, because it is, you know, it can be hard sometimes. You know, there's a lot of dynamics at play. How do we lead with kindness and forgiveness and acceptance? And I feel like those are the qualities that are needed right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned it before, but do you think becoming a mother kind of awakened this in you?
Yeah. awakened a lot in me.
Yeah.
It's been one of the biggest developments of myself in my whole entire life, and I've done a lot of self-development. It's been a beautiful unraveling of who I want to be and how I show up in the world. And that really, it's been a very beautiful medicine of surrender, actually.
Yes. Would you say surrender is one of the biggest things you've kind of taken or learned from being a mum?
Surrender, 100%, and also tuning back into the magic of being alive as something that River has just over and over just shows me, just with how he interacts with the world. I'm like, yeah, birds are so cool.
Yes.
You know, he loves them. And I'm like, yeah, these beautiful beings that can fly. Like, how cool is that?
Yes.
You know, just coming back to that, like, magic and miracle every day.
Yes.
Yeah.
And young kids, River's 3, is he 3?
Almost 3, in March, so got a little bit to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
But kids, I don't know what the point is or the age is, but little kids, they don't have any of the crap, you know, the conditioning and the walls. Mm-hmm. Like you're saying, they almost see the world actually as it is, rather than with all the lenses and stories and traumas and, you know, experiences that happen as you grow up that sort of start to, or can start to cloud and change the way you see the world. Whereas kids, it's just, they really see it.
Yeah, it's pure.
It's so pure.
Yeah, it's so incredible to watch and witness River just interacting with the world. Yes. And yeah, I feel like, you know, I'm guiding him, but he's also guiding me. You know, like I feel like we've definitely had some past lives together. Like it's just 100%. Yeah, I could feel who he was going to be when he was in my womb. Like I was laughing because he's very funny, and so I was laughing like out of nowhere, just like, you're funny. Like I could feel it.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
It was really cool. Yeah, it's such a beautiful connection. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what you just said about he's taught you a lot. It's also, I think, it's having a child or a relationship between a parent and a child is symbiotic.
Oh yeah,
it's two-way, you know. And I think sometimes being a parent can be perceived as this. It's kind of one way.
Yeah,
but it's just, I don't think it works like that. It's like this, again, it's almost the reciprocity.
100%.
You know, which I think when you look at it like that, it can completely change the way you parent and just how you view the relationship with the child.
Oh, totally. I mean, we're just mirrors for each other, aren't we? Like they're literally mirroring us.
Yes.
And we can see ourselves in them with the way that they respond, because we're like, oh, where did they learn that?
Yes.
You know, where did they learn that? And it's a really beautiful and loving accountability and checkpoint of, like, you know, what you want to model in your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And becoming a mother, you sort of touched on it before, but what has it kind of, I guess, shown you about the world in the sense of the value of kind of women and being a mother and our women and the undertaking of mothering? Is that valued?
I mean, it's probably one of the most important things in the entire world, the way that we model and shape to our children. Whatever we say, whatever we do becomes their thoughts and their actions. And so if we want to change the world for the better, we have to start there in childhood, especially in these primary years of their existence, you know, like 2 and almost 3. There's so much that they absorb on a daily basis, and how we can allow them to receive the foundations of being a human and take care of themselves is probably the biggest resource and thing that we can do to change the world.
Yes. Yeah. And so for the way you kind of parent and your parenting philosophy, I guess, what what are the things that you do in terms of the way you connect and parent River that are kind of, it's fundamental to your philosophy as a parent?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what I want to do is show up as the most loving and aware human that I could possibly be in each moment. And how do I foster safety and connection and compassion and curiosity as the foundations of our relationship, and model those in a really good way, because safety and connection is the thread that weaves us all together. It's something that we need to be able to have that full expression of self, is when you have safety and you have connection. It's compassion, because how we relate to ourselves, how we talk to ourselves, all the different parts of us, and how we talk to others is so important in how we go about our daily lives. And the curiosity is what I touched on before, is like, how do we have that magic and awe and wonder and reverence and sacredness to the world, you know, like teaching him to speak to the plants and give the plant a kiss and cuddle and all of those things to like really bring out the magic. And as I said, that's a medicine that River has reshared with me. And when we do all of those things, then we're able to commune in a beautiful way, in a symbiotic way, as you mentioned before, with each other and the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's such a good point, because if we're raising children who see the world and respect the world, the decisions they make as they get older, will change the world, and they'll grow up with this, just with the connection and the love and actually seeing the world around them.
Yeah.
And
their lens.
And then, you know, how they live, what they do, you know, how they kind of solve problems will be completely different, because they're coming at it from kind of having this strong foundation of respect and love for themselves and what's around them.
Yeah, and all beings.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think it's important in parenting to, when we step out of alignment in those things, to take accountability and acknowledgement of those actions. For example, and I'm glad that it's in the minority of our experience, but when I raise my voice with River, I make sure that I get to him on eye level and I say sorry. I look him in the eyes and I say, I'm sorry that Mummy raised her voice. That's not how I should have approached that.
Yes.
And the act of doing that ritual of repair, when we just are in our humanness, we are human, and this is what happens sometimes when we're dysregulated. And that's another point that I love to share with Rivi, is the ways in which we can regulate and balance and create space, etc. But when we're not regulated, because sleep's not a really cool thing, you know, for parents, you know, all of the things that allow us to feel in balance, when we're not in that space, we have to take accountability for that, so that they know that when they step out of alignment, that there's a way back into alignment.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And like you just said, that is part of being human, you know, being emotional, dysregulated, not behaving in a way, you know, may have wanted to. But, showing your kids that that's okay, and the repair, and just admitting that you did something wrong.
Well, yeah.
Or not wrong, but, you know.
Out of alignment.
Exactly. Is a really powerful lesson for little kids.
Well, it shows that you respect them.
Yes.
And that, you know, they're not just children, they're human beings. And, you know, if you were to raise your voice at a friend, I'm sure that would be a repair, a ritual of repair with them. So, you know, the same respect should be to every single human being and non-human being, you know, like how we commune. And when we step out of alignment, because that's just our human nature, like we can't be these perfect beings all the time, and that's okay.
Yes.
But how we respond after the fact is very important.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. I saw, it was probably a meme, but I saw this thing, it was a few weeks ago, but it was, I can't remember exactly, but the premise of it was kind of, if we raise our kids to be themselves and being comfortable being themselves and being able to express themselves, they won't need to spend their 20s finding themselves.
Exactly.
And I'd never thought about that.
Yeah.
But it's such a beautiful, I think that is such a beautiful kind of approach.
Oh, definitely. I've been thinking about that a lot because obviously with Imaginal, we're sharing all these different practices for people to connect with themselves again, etc. And I've been thinking into it, how do we share these practices and rituals now with the children so that they have the resources that they don't have to do when they're in their 20s and 30s. They have them from now so that those adjustments to life circumstances that happen, they're already equipped to be resourced enough to be able to deal with them.
Yes.
You know, so that's something that is very close to my heart, and there's some few things that I'm going to be creating based on that.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
And then the kids are they have the skills to then, like you said, things will always happen and life's up and down. But to have those then skills is so empowering.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like a lot of the things that, you know, Dave, my partner, and I do is to really model what can happen with Rivi. And, you know, he's always invited into the tea space, you know, after he wakes up, he comes and joins me and sits on my lap while I have tea. And, like, you know, it's a bit fiddly and wiggly and all of that sort of stuff. But, like, he's seeing that I put value on this experience. We share a prayer of intention in the morning with either some sage or frankincense, and he sits there and he, like, puts his hand to the smoke to, like, take it in, and, you know, like, all of those little things. He stretches with me, he does yoga with me, all of those aspects of taking care of my body and my mind and my spirit and my heart is really important. How we hold space for him and his emotions. To say that it's okay to feel like this, that's cool, let's just work through it, you know?
Yes.
And, you know, knows that Dave goes to the gym like 4 times a week. He's like, Daddy's at the gym. And I was like, yeah, and loves to, like, his make-believe is actually quite interesting because, you know, that children share what they learn and everything through their make-believe, and maybe some things that they're experiencing emotionally, they'll act it out in their make-believe and their play, right? That's how they express it. And so, like, River, his make-believe entails going to the sauna, making broth.
Oh my God, amazing.
Chlorophyll with water, gives me a chlorophyll with water, reishi and honey, you know, like, because these are the things that we just live. That's how we live. And so these practices are instilled in him, that he's, like, pretending to go to the sauna. He'll just do, like, a little box, and then you'll go and he's like, I'm just in the sauna, you want to come in the sauna? I'm like, yeah, I'd love to go to the sauna with you. And he's actually come to the sauna with us twice, just for a couple of minutes, and he loved it. But yeah, like, he's the one that comes and says, Mama, vitamin C, like, he has his vitamin C in the morning and all of that sort of stuff. So I think the way that we live and how we model the way that we live is what they are going to do. So
yes,
it all, again, comes back to self, coming back full cycle.
Yes.
But it does come back to the way that we take care and tend to things, is how others feel inspired to take care of themselves and tend to themselves.
Yes, 100%. It's like being the lighthouse, you know, and just showing a different, or just a way of living and being, rather than telling people how they should live. Because it's actually just about yourself. Yeah,
and no one listens anyway.
No, and exactly. No one wants to be told what to do. And it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just sort of, it almost then maybe allows people to then explore what works for them.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And that's the premise, right? It has to be something that you're connected to, that you relate to, because something that I do, you'd be like, that's so boring. I don't want to do that. And then other things that I'd be like, oh, that's not for me, but that's cool. It's like, whatever it is, there's so much out there that you can attune to. All that matters is that you're creating space for yourself, that you're listening to yourself, and that with all of that, you're creating some kind of balance, you know, because we're always balancing. We never come into balance. Like this earth is currently rebalancing itself at every moment. There's no state of where it achieves balance. Same with us. We're never going to achieve balance, but we're going to be balancing enough to make it feel good.
Yes. Yeah. You mentioned before that when you're a little girl, your dream was to be a businesswoman with a briefcase, which you did.
Yeah.
But I would also say you're still doing.
Yeah.
And if you think about being a businesswoman now versus what you thought about being a businesswoman when you were 8, how do they look different? And what does a businesswoman, I guess, mean to you today?
Yeah. I mean, I think businesswoman isn't like a word that I would describe myself as. I think for me it's what am I in service to? And it might sound a little bit like, oh, what are you talking about? But like that's what I feel I'm doing. I feel like I'm being in service to something, like even Imaginal, it's its own being now. It's like separate from Nat, Nisus and I, you know. It's something that I'm in service to. The community creates the environment as well, and like how it is co-shaped. So I feel like I'm in service to that and whatever it needs to evolve into next. You know, it's like, how do I tend to that? Like I tend to anything in my life. I feel like with saying that, you know, there is obviously all of the like operational and financial and all of those things that play a part in it. And I like to kind of like tune into that because I enjoy that as well. You know, I really enjoy that. I love to be organized, and I love to have everything systematically like organized and created. So I think that aspect of me as an 8-year-old still stands, but the way I approach my service and what I offer in the world is different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And would you say what you view as, I mean, yes, but what now, today, how would you describe a successful life? And what does success kind of look like for you?
Success for me feels like just stepping into the day, just feeling so resourced and ready for anything that comes my way. You know, I just want to feel joy. I want things to feel slow. Slow living is like the biggest thing for me. And I love just like rolling into the day and doing my practice in the morning before Rivi wakes up and just like allowing things to flow. I feel like success for me feels like flow, and that means through abundance, you know, from what comes in, what goes out. It is about the joy that I feel when I'm sharing and offering all of the things, how I'm helping others or supporting others as like my offering and my service. It has to like feel that reciprocal and prosperous, you know, for everybody involved. Yes. You know, I feel like that feels good for me when I know that what I'm doing is being well received, and likewise it's coming back to me in those like feedback and all of those things that come with it. For me, it comes down to like reciprocity, you know, how I feel good in that, what I'm giving is coming back, etc. Like that's what success feels like to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Which is the opposite of what success might be seen as generally.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's how much joy can I... Like joy is an incredible success measure, I feel. Like if you're not feeling joy or like flow, flow is also a really big thing for me, like to be in like expression and to be creative and to have that. I think that is so important to me personally.
Yes. How
I live my life. I want to feel in flow and I want to feel creative. I want to feel like I'm making a difference in some way.
Yes.
You know, and of course that reciprocity of like what comes back to me as well, so that I can sustain my life too. So it's like, that's what success is for me. It's like what I give back, it also sustains me, you know, like that's what's successful, because then everyone's happy.
Yes. And I guess being in flow also takes away the almost fixation on the end result.
Yeah.
So if you're creating something, it's the flow of it. I could be wrong, but for you, is it sort of like it's, you know, the process and the flow of that rather than then the end result?
Yeah, it's the becoming. It's actually the creative process that I love. Like, I love that. You know, there's some things that I'm creating at the moment that I'm just like, yes, I'm like getting like so excited and inspired by it. I think that's what allows my system to feel nourished. Right. And I think that's, for me, as another success factor, is how nourished I feel and how nourished my family feels. You know, I think that encompasses a lot of things like balance and peace and flexibility in emotion, you know, because you can't always be happy all the time, but there's like a flexibility and adaptability to moments that do arise.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's how nourished you and your family feel is a beautiful, it's such a lovely way.
Yeah.
Because also if you sort of have that lens, you have to, again, tune back into yourself and think like, how am I feeling? Do I feel nourished? What do I need to do to get back to that place?
Oh, definitely. I think that's a constant dialogue that I have within myself. Like, if I'm feeling off, I'm like, okay, I think I need to go for an ocean swim. I need to go do this, and that, and then I'll come back. You know, there's always like a rebalancing that's happening within me, like, because I'm so attuned to my system now.
Yes.
With all of the work that I did with my beautiful friend and Michelle Beatty and around understanding self. All of that learning is so ingrained in me now that I can't help but notice what's happening in my system.
Yes. Which I think is, I would say I was very disconnected from myself, and it's maybe only in the last 6 years, maybe, say. And now I'm like, I wouldn't know when I was getting my period, say.
Yeah.
And then I'd get it and I'd be like, oh,
yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's why I said that's a very simple
totally.
Example. But now I just feel when you kind of, and I'm not perfect by any means, but when you start to reconnect with yourself, you're like, oh, this is what it feels like. It all makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're attuned with the cycles at play.
Yes.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's refreshing.
And I mean, you often have to go through a lot of shit to, you know, get back to that place.
100%. I definitely did.
Did you? Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, you know, as I said, like, I was so disconnected that I was skipping my moon cycle. I was like, you know, just like full, like, let's go. And the only thing that would allow me to stop and slow down is if I got sick, and that's why I got sick.
Right.
You know, like, that's the disconnection that I had experienced for a long time.
Yes.
You know, like 5 years, probably longer. I can't even remember.
Yes.
Of that, you know, just constant going and not taking a second to just be like, hey, how you doing?
Yes, yes.
You know? So that's a very, like, vast and, like, contrast to where I am now. I mean, there's times, like, obviously that I feel, you know, not in a great space, but there's an awareness of that, and there's resources to help move out of that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you got sick today versus, say, getting sick 6 years ago, is it like you see that as a moment where you just need to stop and rest?
And I love it sometimes. I'm like, this is nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I just I honor where I'm at, basically.
Yes.
You know, like, if I need to rest, I open my whole heart and arms to do that.
Yes.
You know, and prior to that, last, 6 years ago, I would be working on my laptop in bed while I'm sick, and, like, all the rest of it, you know. Like, even there was one time that I had influenza, I was in hospital right? I don't know how long ago this was. And I got on a plane 2 days later to go to Tulum. Like,
yes.
What? Like there's like just like little examples of how disconnected I was,
yes.
which I would never dream of if I was sick in hospital, and then 2 days later I'd be like, I'm not going.
Yes, exactly.
So these are just little like symbols of like how when we don't listen to each other, we say yes to things that we know we don't want to do, but we feel like we're inclined to. Maybe that people pleaser part is taking the leadership in the system rather than being a contributor to the system when making decisions, etc. Those are the signals that perhaps there might be some disconnection there, and to take a moment to just tune in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it also means you can then think about what nourishes you and what depletes you.
Yeah.
Like you said, if you're just saying yes to everything,
yeah,
there may not be that awareness of like, oh, did I get something back from that, and did it nourish me, or am I just even more depleted?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think when you're just in that system of like saying yes to everything without checking in first,
yes,
and it's okay to be like, I'm just going to take a moment to see if that's going to be something I want to do. But we're always inclined to be like, yes, I want to do that. And then later on you're like, damn it, I've got so much on, Yes. So I think there's like this, awareness of self that allows you to just take a moment and be okay in the pause.
Yes.
Be okay in the pause before responding. And I think that's a different way of approaching it.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 And so what's next for you? What's kind of in your world, in your, what are you creating? What's kind of, on the horizon for you?
Oh, I feel like I'm just feeling really inspired at the moment. And so there's lots of things like on the horizon, and, the next stages of Imaginal, what that looks like, hopefully doing more some in-person events, because everything at the moment's online. And then, as I mentioned before, like there's some things I want to do in the children's space to provide resources and tools to help them in emotional regulation, and just be able to tune in to themselves and each other, so through books and other tools, as well as potentially a course. So,
oh, amazing.
Yeah, so there's a few things like on the horizon, like literally it was just yesterday that that came into play. So yeah, like we're just I'm just kind of moving with it all and seeing what happens and doing it in a slow way so that I don't jump to anything.
Yes. Amazing. Well, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Like really incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been cool. I never thought that I would be doing this like 7 years ago. I was like, I thought just on that corporate path, etc. And then now I just feel like there's like infinite ways to express. Yeah.
Yes. And a trust? Is there just a trust of, I'll try this thing, this is coming to me, I feel like I want to create this.
Yeah.
I'll just try it and just trust. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, I feel like there's potential and possibility that wasn't there before. Yeah, that there's, I've always, not always, but in these last like 6 years of exploring, I've realized that human beings are just infinite in the ways that they can express, and we often limit ourselves in lots of different ways. I'm not going to be an astronaut or anything like that, but like in the ways that I feel resonant for me that come up and naturally come up, then just try it, just give it a go and see what happens.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode with Brooke and got a different perspective on the ways that we can kind of view ourselves, life, and also how we commune with nature. As always, if you liked it, please rate the show, share the episode with someone who you think might like it, and I hope to see you back here next week.